What is the absolute strongest form of Sukuna? Let's talk about it. But if you're not caught up on the manga, you're going to want to skip this one. So this video today is sponsored by the insanely generous donation from Kaun. Thank you, King. Like, what the hell? Thank you so much, man. And he wants to know 10 Shadows plus Mahoraga plus Sukuna versus Heian era Sukuna. Now, Kaun, I don't know if you saw a video where I tackled this question a few weeks ago, but this is a great chance to revisit it because there's some things in the manga and some issues people brought up in my original take on this that I would like to readdress. So do check out that video if you did never see it. I'll link it down in the pinned comments on the YouTube version of this video for those of you watching there. But let's kind of re-go over this from what we know now. All right, so first up, we need to set the stage of this matchup. Sukuna v. Sukuna, they are both at 100% maximum power. So 20 fingers plus the head, whatever you want to call it, they're both there, okay? Also, they both have access to the full Sukuna toolkit, meaning cleave, dismantle, black box, flame arrow, whatever else we end up finding out is a part of that toolkit, both of them have access to it. No one is holding back, as it were. Also, they're, fully refreshed, right? Both at 100%, cursed energy reserves. Everyone has all of their limbs, etc. It's just fully peak versus peak. Who would win here? So in my original video on this subject, I ended up picking Megumi Sukuna with the 10 Shadows and Mahoraga. But I want to readdress some things because in that original video, I basically equated their physical stats, which is not fair to do now in retrospect. And we even have some hardcore proof of this from a recent chapter. So I was assuming, it's still Sukuna at the end of the day. There didn't seem to be a big physical gap between Yuji Sukuna and Megumi Sukuna. Now, it's hard to equate because they had different numbers of fingers, right? But Yuji, we know, is a physical freak, right? Potentially heavenly restricted, but that's not what we're discussing here. But in any case, he's a specimen, right? But there didn't seem to be any downgrade in strength from when Sukuna went from Yuji to Megumi. So by that same logic, I felt like Sukuna's physical stats were just based on his essence more so and not necessarily what actual physical body he was in. So for that reason, I equated Megumi Sukuna's strength and speed with Heian era Sukuna's strength and speed. Now, obviously, he has extra arms, so that plays a role. But if you're just thinking of it in video game number statistics, I assume they had the same numbers. But now I don't think they do. I think Heian era Sukuna is definitely stronger, and the reason I point to this is from what Gojo told us about Miguel in the most recent chapter. His body structure allows him to just be more physically dominant compared to 99% of sorcerers who are typically Japanese, right? So that tells us that, the more muscular, the more built your frame originally is, kind of the more of an impact your cursed energy reinforcement is going to have. Another way to think of it could be that you don't need to use as much cursed energy reinforcement. In any case, I am now going to give the physical attributes column, if you will, to Heian era Sukuna. We're going to say that he outclasses Megumi Sukuna. But an interesting thing to think about here is how that would affect the speed stat. Does he have more muscles? Sure, but could the more slender frame allow Megumi Sukuna to be slightly faster? I don't know, so for the purposes of this, I'm going to equate their speed stats again, but we're going to give the strength edge to Heian era. All right, so this version of Sukuna has the advantage in the physical stats, but mentally, they're exactly equal, right? They're the same person. So what I mean by that is they've got the same IQ, the same battle IQ, and the same strategies. Now, that's not to say that they each couldn't come up with their own independent strategies as the battle is going on, because of course that's what's going to happen. But just in general, neither one is going to be able to surprise the other with a tactic or with one of their own abilities because they're fighting themselves. They are fully aware of what the other one has in their arsenal, if that makes sense. So because of that, this really boils down, in my opinion, to now the physical advantage that this version of Sukuna has, plus the extra arms and the extra mouth versus 10 Shadows, Mahoraga, right? And just like in my first video, I have to lean that Mahoraga is going to be more influential here. But there is one other glaring thing we really need to talk about before we can make a final decision. and that is the world cutting slash. Should it be fair for both of them to have access to this? Because this is an attack that was only made possible because of Mahoraga. So should only Megumi Sukuna get access to this, or should we also let Heian era Sukuna have it? Because I think this would be a big part of this battle because, we know this ignores durability, essentially, right? Now, I want to be like as fair as possible, so I think we should also give Heian era Sukuna access to this, but I think we should make it so that he has to do the extra requirements, which he's fully capable of since he has the extra arms and mouths, right? Which would be another way that could come into play in this matchup. I don't think we need to give Megumi Sukuna the extra requirements because in a perfect world scenario, he wouldn't have had to have made that binding vow. The only reason he did was because he was missing an arm against Gojo, right? In this fight, he's at 100%. He has all his limbs. So I think we give him the world cutting slash without the extra requirements, and we give it to Heian era Sukuna with the extra requirements. So with that being the case, obviously this version of Sukuna has an easier time with hand signs and chants due to his form, right? But with the extra requirements, I feel like we can pretty much call it a wash. They can both do the world cutting slash pretty much equally, in my opinion. So with all of that being the case, it then, in my opinion, comes down to what's more impactful in this fight. The increased physical stats and strength versus Mahoraga in the 10 Shadows. And I'm ultimately going to land right where I landed previously. I think Mahoraga makes the difference because, again, this Sukuna is not an idiot. He's not going to get into a hand-to-hand combat with this guy. Sure, this version is going to do everything he can to make that the case, but I don't think he's that much faster to force that upon this version of Sukuna. So I think he can just have Mahoraga hide in the shadows for literally the entire fight until he's fully adapted to everything this guy could do, and then he can go all out on the offensive and meet him on the battlefield. And at that point, I feel like he's got enough advantages to just win the fight ultimately, right? Because again, the domains aren't going to mean anything because they're exactly equal. All the other techniques aren't really going to mean anything besides the world cutting slash, since that one can go through anything. But since they have the same battle IQ and the relative same ease in getting off the world cutting slash, I don't really see this guy, getting one over on Megumi Sukuna. Now, something I like to say is I never like to say, definitely this character wins 100 times out of 100. So if we're going to get into the weeds on it, I think it's more of like a 7-3 or 6-4 type of matchup. I'm sure he's going to get the jump on him here and there with those extra arms, that stronger body. But ultimately, I think just Mahoraga is more impactful in this fight. And don't get it twisted. I'm not saying that this version of Sukuna is like weak or anything. In fact, I think this version of Sukuna is going to be the strongest when it comes to 99% of potential matchups. I think the extra arms, the extra mouth, and the stronger physical frame is going to better suit him in literally every battle except Gojo and himself. Gojo, obviously, because he needed the adaptation to get through Infinity, and himself, because when he's fighting himself, they are literally equal on almost every playing field. So the fact that Megumi Sukuna has more bag of tricks is going to make the difference. So that's where I'm coming from, but I would ultimately say, again, not Gojo, not Sukuna himself, this version of Sukuna is the strongest. Anyways, y'all, that's going to do it for my thoughts on this matchup, but please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I really would love to hear them. Do you think it's fair that we're including the world cutting slash? Should we get rid of that for both of them? Let me know. And Count, again, man, thank you so much for the generous support. It really means the world. And then finally, really quick, y'all, special shout out to A and Kashimo Low Diffs Yuta for sending in some support. But I actually refunded you guys because these donations were about the Kashimo versus Yuta matchup. And I think we've pretty much run that into the ground at this point. So no disrespect, I'm not unthankful. That's why I refunded you guys. But I feel like unless there's something really new and concrete to talk about in that debate, we've covered it. So for the time being, please don't donate for this anymore just because I will refund you unless there is something like actually interesting to talk about there. But again, thank you guys so much.